What's the worst thing you've accidentally overheard? After speaking with my grandpa on the phone before he properly hung up, I heard him commenting to my uncle how ungrateful I was. I had at that point visited every week for a year and cleaned his entire bedroom, kitchen, bathroom, hallway and living room every single goddamned week, usually bringing some food or dessert with me. I moved out of town shortly after this. My family and I were at a restaurant and there was a father and his daughter, we'll call D for daughter, sitting in the booth right across the aisle from us. D looked to be no more than 20 years old. She talks the whole time about her ex, Chris. Apparently, Chris was married and D did not give two sheets. She said it was the wife's fault for not being good enough to keep her husband faithful. Welp. Chris was still sleeping with his wife because she got pregnant. When D found out wife was pregnant, D told Chris he had to choose between her and his wife. At first, Chris chose D. Then he found out his unborn child had congenital heart defects. So, he called off the divorce, broke up with D, and moved back in with his wife. D sits there in silence looking slightly bewildered before saying, "I don't know why he chose her and the retard baby. So what if it dies? They can always make another one." But that's not the worst part. Her dad breaks his silence and asks, "So, your mom and Chris aren't getting divorced? Your mom and Chris? Your mom?" This batshit crazy bitch was having a blatant affair with her much older stepfather. Made him choose between her and her pregnant mother. And then made sociopathic comments about her unborn brother. Edit. Thanks for the upvotes everyone. I would like to clarify a few things. This conversation took place at a Mimi's cafe in the East Valley of the Phoenix, Arizona metro area. She was 100% white trash from head to toe. My family seriously were expecting a camera crew for a prank type TV show to show up. It's hard to fathom someone that demonic truly does walk amongst us. Also, I'm not positive the man she was dining with was her father. He looked old enough and they had similar facial features. I want out of this marriage. Didn't enjoy hearing my parents split up in the next room when I was a kid. My parents used to fight all the time. They talked about divorce a lot but never actually did it. But the one that really stands out was when they were arguing over money and my dad laid this line down: "If you would have had an abortion like you were supposed to, we'd have as much food as we wanted right now." Hearing, at 14, that your parents didn't really want you and their lives would be better without you stung a bit. Waiting to Skype call my long distance girlfriend and before the video comes on the audio peaks up. Heard her roommate yell to her, "You gonna dump that sorry little boy now?" Yeah, she immediately turned off the feed and broke up with me over Skype text instead. Nice. I'd been on holiday for about a month, on the other side of the world to my family. I had FaceTimed my mum and told her what I was up to. Found out what was going on back home. Just normal conversation. Eventually we said bye and mum ended the call, or so she thought. She'd just paused it so the audio was still coming through. I heard my little sister ask her, "Are you crying?" and mum said, "Not now." I quickly hung up. I think she missed me and didn't want me to know she was sad. I heard half of a phone conversation. A man said into his phone, "I ain't doing this shit. There wasn't supposed to be no security guard here." Overheard by me. The security guard. In a bank that had recently been robbed. We don't need to care about him since he's adopted. I was maybe 10 vacationing with some family friends at a local summer resort. The family was trying forever to have a baby and after 10 something years decided to adopt a toddler. A year later the woman got pregnant, ended up having 2 more bio kids, and still loved her adopted still the same. The husband however became indifferent to their adopted and spoiled the bio baby rotten and took pleasure in making sure the adopted knows this. He made a lot of jokes of returning the kid since he is not blood related anyways and other comments that were hurtful and out of line. Soon cousins of the kid started to taunt this poor 4-year-old who was confused of why he was being teased. Mind you, this happened in a 1-day span too. Mom tried to shield him as much as she can, and the husband made a serious faux pas of making that comment in front of 10 other people from church too. He tried to backpedal fast, but not before my scary mother, the leader of the friend group, ripped him a new one. He never joined us anymore in gatherings, and eventually the whole family moved to another town months later. It was when I was a kid, and it was just my single mom and I living in a house together. She had late stage ovarian cancer that was getting worse. One afternoon she told me she was tired and needed to go lay down in her room. Totally common with her condition, so nothing struck me as odd. I went to her room with a glass of water to put by her bed for when she woke up. But right as about to turn the knob to get into her room, I was thrown off guard when I heard her voice, and it sounded like she was incredibly emotional and sad. There was no phone in her room, and I knew nobody was over at our house visiting. It took me a minute of eavesdropping to realize that she was using a tape recorder to record her last goodbyes to me for after she died. She died 2 weeks later. I found the tape. This was years ago, and I still haven't been able to get myself to listen to it. The memory of being there while she was recording it, and the memory of my naive adolescent self finally realizing that my mom was about to die is just too overwhelming for me still. But I'm glad to know that one day when I'm ready, I will have a recording of her voice to listen to. Not that much of an accident, but my mom caught my dad having an affair, and I overheard her as she was yelling at the top of her lungs while my dad was sobbing, begging her to take him back. Never looked at my dad the same way after that. Edit, just for some more background. I was 16 when this happened, and I'm now 34. My parents are still together. I heard my ex having a business call in his office that sounded a lot like cheating. To be fair, the line can be pretty blurry when it comes to being a pharma rep. I was 14 years old and it was the end of 8th grade. I ducking hated middle school and was picked on mercilessly. As the end of the year celebration, we went to one of those putt-putt driving range batting cage places, and my older brother came and visited for lunch. He was like 19 and home from college, and it was really sweet of him to do. I also have to note that objectively my brother is very attractive. At the time he was a college swimmer, so he was in really good shape, and all my friends were gaga about him. When I was in line to get some more food, I heard these two itchy girls in front of me go, "How does she have such a hot brother when she turned out so bad?" Oof. My poor fragile 14-year-old self-esteem. I pretended I hadn't heard them, left the line, and managed not to burst into tears. Teenage girls can be so cruel. Was bartending. On our busiest day, people were waiting everywhere, even outside. Family is a little loud and rowdy. A kid about 8 can't be still. Him and a guy seems to be about late 20s are wrestling and acting up. Kid is yelling no end and screaming. People are kind of used to them at this point. Suddenly the guy starts yelling, "I am gonna grab your pen 15. And says it a few times. Kid is yelling no. The entire restaurant got dead silent and everyone was jaw-dropped staring finally. After a bit too long, the mother is like, "WTF, can't say that or act like that," and they all go outside. So guy at work was on his cell phone. He starts getting louder and louder. Eventually he is basically yelling into his phone. He was on the phone with his wife, verbally abusing her and yelling about how bad he was going to beat her when he got home. Security was called. He was fired and the police were contacted about the potential abuse. 2 of my best friends in high school had a conference call about me. I just happened to be with the 3rd friend they called and overheard how they thought I was annoying and I'm only friends with this other person for popularity. Stopped being friends with them shortly after this. Brought this up in another thread like a month ago. On my first day of college while waiting online at the bookstore. I know you should never buy books at the college, lol. 2 girls were behind me on the line talking about a cute guy in front of them on the line. I naturally took this to think it was me and it raised my ego quite a bit. Until one of them tapped me on the shoulder and asking me to get the attention of the guy just ahead of me online. Had a co-worker plot with her husband to falsely accuse her ex of child abuse. She wanted full custody. She ended up with 1 supervised visit per month. I wonder who spilled the beans? When I was 12, I overheard my stepdad saying to my mum how much better their life would be without me there and how awful I am and how he wishes I wasn't there. My mum just agreed. I wasn't even a bad kid, did well in school, never got in trouble. I could be a stroppy teenager. He was an awful manipulative, violent misogynist, and I wish he wasn't here. A few months ago in the gym, 3 guys were talking very loudly. I could hear them over my music. The weight room was pretty empty. One was talking about how his girlfriend was such a bitch for not putting out. He detailed all her excuses, then went on to say at least he had his other girlfriend. One of the other ones piped up and said he should just wait until she falls asleep because then she can't do anything about it. They all cackled and he said he'd thought of that before but now he'd have to try it. Completely vile humans. My mother once pocket dialed me and I overheard her and my stepfather talking about the house I was living in. I was living in her house, which I had an agreement with her that I would pay the mortgage and all the bills, and when it was paid off she would sign it over to me. This wasn't anything spectacular. The house was in dire need of major repair and she hadn't lived there for years anyway. Also, we had found out that she hadn't been paying the mortgage for over a year even though I'd been giving her money for it since I was 17. Well, my wife and I had offered her $10,000 for the house. It had $3,000 left on the mortgage and was about to be foreclosed on, just to try and get her to live up to her side of the bargain we had reached years before. So I heard stepdad ask what she's going to do about the house. She said, "I don't know." Stepdad reminded her that we offered more than was owed. Her exact words were, "I'll give it to his sister before I sell it to him." So we found a different house. And his sister was given that one. She dumped $40,000 worth of repairs and sold it for $100,000. Edit, added a K. I was in my garage one night a few years back when I overheard my teenage neighbor on the phone trying to convince his girlfriend to get an abortion. I was on a coach bus traveling to another state and I woke up to someone whispering, "Hey, remember what we said earlier?" I thought they were about to argue again since they were going back and forth about something earlier, only to hear muffled sucking noises. At first I was like, "What?" Then was like, "Oh. On a bus. Guy, yeah, I'm moving in front of World Bar. Blah blah. I'm going to pick up so much. Blah blah. Hey, you're probably right. That itch may have given me AIDS. I guess it wasn't so much an accident as it was an inevitability. But as I was entering my dorm one day freshman year of college, a girl who was sitting in the courtyard shouted to her friend who was right behind me, "The doctor says nothing is wrong with any. I just have an abnormal nipple." Was eating at a Joe's Crab Shack several years ago. Our server was a younger black guy. So we're all done eating. Restaurant is fairly empty. All of a sudden we hear him clear as day in the kitchen, "What? NRI will knock your methodican head off." Then we see him walk out of the kitchen with the manager. He goes outside for a few minutes to cool off presumably. A short time later he comes out with the desserts a couple people at our table ordered and says, all cheery, "So, who had the cheesecake?" It was so weird. I overheard a girl that I basically fell in love with talking with her friend like, "He's cute but I think we will just stay friends." I overheard that literally seconds before I was going to invite her on a date. You should have talked to her about it. People will often say those sorts of things to kind of keep from getting hopes up if they are unsure if you like them. I overheard my long-term boyfriend's mom talking negatively about me multiple times when she didn't think I was around. We have been dating a long time and I try to be as thoughtful as possible. It is what it is, I guess. I can't make her like me or change the way she is. I was 14 and I overheard my mother talking with a doctor about my younger sister's cancer treatment. I had no idea she had cancer. She had no idea she had cancer. As soon as she got off the phone I asked her what was going on. She burst into tears. I burst into tears. My little sister was 8 at the time and had been ill for months. So I helped my parents talk to her. It was very upsetting. We shortly after took her to a clinic 500 miles away. Spent a week there. No cancer. No leukemia. Misdiagnosed. She had an abscess that caused her symptoms. Easily treated. But I'll never forget hearing the phone call. You know that school in Asheville, Oklahoma where the transgender kid is getting shit on because she just happens to live in the center of redneckery? I live 5 miles from that town. In a slightly larger center of redneckery. I was at the bar at Applebee's, only place to get a beer and food after work, don't judge, and the people across from me were talking about it. Apparently they didn't want their Christian kids to go to school with it from the devil. The thing also was special enough to use the teacher's restroom. I sometimes get culture shock in my own hometown. I can't wait to move and never look back. I work in a hospital. I overheard a doctor telling a 1-year-old's parents their child just died. I will never forget the sounds that came out the mother. When I was 9, I overheard my mom telling the maid not to tell the kids that we're eating horse meat for dinner. NSFW. Outside of a nightclub, a drunken couple was splitting up. I can't believe what I've heard tonight. You've had half the blokes in this town up your etter. You're a mucky slag. I'm leaving you. Oh, you're not getting your CDs back. I had my son, and about 2 months after he was born I was called a lazy mother by my own mother. A couple months later she was on the phone with one of her friends claiming I abused my son because I let him cry a bit longer than she deemed necessary. I was outside her door at 2 AM to bring him back to bed. I was 21 and was shell-shocked with being a mom so suddenly. Didn't find out I was pregnant until I was almost 5 months along. I was rushed into a lot of things. I was on a cruise and reading a book in one of the lounges. This very upset woman sat sort of behind me. And her husband was with her. She was crying because their vet had some bad news about their dog. And she was trying to call the vet. She told the husband after she got off the phone that she needed 15 minutes to listen to a song by herself and collect her thoughts. He asked if he could get her anything and she said no. She just wanted to be alone for a minute. Once he left, she called her boyfriend and started giving him grief about girls liking his pictures on Instagram and how jealous she was, and was making plans to sneak off to call him later. Scumbag. When I was 7 we had 2 house phones in different parts of the house. I heard the phone ring one time and my parents were both holed up in my dad's office and picked up the phone, which I thought was weird. I picked up the other phone to satiate my curiosity, only to hear some lady screaming at my mom about how bad my dad was in bed and she doesn't care about him anyway. Just wanted to get ahead at work. Was a lot to swallow at the time and an awkward afternoon. When I heard my parents fighting about when my dad had to move out. The fight was loud and started getting violent before I broke it up. Also the day I learned my parents were getting divorced. Not the worst, but definitely a head-shaking moment. I was at the DC Zoo with me little girl visiting the gorilla exhibit. When a small boy 10-11 years old turns to his mother and asks, "Mom, it says that we've evolved from primates, is this true?" Which point his mother scolds him and says, "Don't read that filth. All humans have descended from Christ, not primates. Start reading your Bible and stop reading your science book." I was genuinely stuck in awe for a few minutes as I felt a bit sorry for the small boy.